And we back online again. I want to welcome everybody here for Right Connections Wednesday night small group. We are doing Your Move by Andy Stanley from North Point Resources. Apologize for last week. Was technical difficulties with camera and everything not working, plus our Sunday service the camera was not up for, but we're back online now, and I'm thankful for everybody that's here and all those who are watching us on the net. We thank you for your participation, and we're glad to see all you smiling faces. Let's open up and welcome the Lord here with us. Gracious Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this day. We thank you for your love, your mercy, your grace, and we ask that your blessings be with each and every one of us here tonight. Even those that are online and watching, bless them, their families, and all around them. Lord, open our eyes, our mind, and our hearts to receive your word, but strengthen us so we may glorify you in all that we do. We ask your presence here with us and speak through us tonight so we may touch many lives for your kingdom. In Christ's name, amen. Last week was a good session to get everybody started in thinking, called of Your Move. This one I did preview a little bit deeper, and Joseph is the topic, and it's presented in a way I really never thought about. But we're going to have some fun here tonight and hopefully get everybody out of here before 11. Got your attention on that one. But this one is a good session, and I think y'all going to enjoy. Let's go ahead.
What story do you want to tell? And in every transition in life and in every decision-making environment, you are writing the script for the story that you tell. And again, the dilemma for us, and I'm going to explain this from the scripture in just a minute, the dilemma for us is this. We all already have a story up to this point. But when we're facing new decisions and new obstacles and new opportunities, we forget to attach the current to the past. And we forget to ask this question: which of these opportunities, which of these choices best fits with my story so far? Which of these opportunities, which of these choices is most consistent with the story I've been telling so far and the story I want to tell in the future? Because the next season of your life is nothing more. Again, no matter how big and scary and uncertain it is, it's nothing more in some way than a story that one day you're going to tell. And here's what I know about you. You want to be able to tell your whole story. You want to be able to look at your kids someday when they're adults and tell them your whole story and not skip any parts. You want to be able to look into the eyes of the person that you fall in love with someday and spend the rest of your life with, and you're going to want to be able to tell them the whole story, and you're not going to want to have to lie about you. You're not going to want to have to lie about your story. And the way that you get there is to remember in every decision-making environment, ask the question, what's the story that I want to someday tell? Now, there's an amazing illustration of this in the Old Testament. In fact, the great thing about this illustration is it comes from a story that most of us already know, or at least know something about. It's found in the book of Genesis. Specifically, it's a story that spreads out over a whole bunch of chapters in Genesis. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 39 specifically. It's a story that takes place in 1850 BC, and it's the story of Joseph. Now, most of you know bits and pieces of the story of Joseph, but what makes Joseph's story so relevant to this principle is that we know more about Joseph's story in a condensed period of time than anybody else in the Old Testament. We have so much detail about the story of Joseph. So let me kind of give you the overview. Then we're going to look at about 5 verses together. Some of you are familiar with this story. When Joseph was 17, he had 10 older brothers and 1 younger brother. There were 12 sons in the family. His older brothers were jealous of him because his father, Jacob, seemed to like him more than the older brothers. And when he was 17 years old, he went way, way, way from home out to the pastures where his brothers were taking care of the flocks. And when the brothers saw him coming, you remember this, they began having a discussion. Now, you may have some sibling rivalry in your family, but I doubt your brothers or sisters have ever had a discussion like this. The discussion went like this: should we kill him or just sell him? Should we kill him or just sell him? All in favor of kill, all in favor of sell. Should we kill him? Should we sell him? And so as Joseph gets closer, hey, brothers, they've decided, we'll just throw him in a well and decide tonight. So they strip him of his very expensive coat. Now, he's a kid from a rich family, so this is the rich, spoiled kid. Take his coat that his dad made for him, tear it up, throw him in a well because they can't decide. Do we kill him or do we have mercy and just sell him as a slave? Do we kill him or do we sell him? They put blood on the coat. They later tell their father, oh, we found this coat. Joseph must have been killed by a wild animal. They sell him to some slave traders. He ends up in Egypt. He's purchased on the auction block by a man named Potiphar, who is the captain of Pharaoh's royal guard or his personal guard. And so he ends up in the home of a wealthy Egyptian, but he's a slave. Now, at this point, Joseph has several decisions to make, decisions he never wanted to make. How do you respond to being kidnapped by your brothers and sold as a slave into a nation where you'll never see your family again? What do you do with that? And it's a fascinating story because Joseph does something that very few of us would do. He decides not to play the role of the victim. He decides instead to accept his fate from the hand of God. And says, somehow, God, this is your will for me. And he responds in such a way that he takes his responsibility as a slave seriously. He does his best as a slave. And over time, Potiphar recognizes that this is an unusual Hebrew in his family. And he gives him more and more and more and more responsibility. And after a while, he is in charge of Potiphar's entire household. He handles the money. He handles the other slaves. He manages the household. And Potiphar just turns it all over to him. And Joseph finds himself in a pretty good situation. Now, he's still a slave. He can't go home. There are restrictions, but he's not in a dungeon. He's not chained to something. He's not rowing a boat. He's not out on the Nile River doing something. Things are as good as they could possibly get for somebody who's been kidnapped from their home and treated the way he was treated. So things are pretty good. And then, just as things are beginning to look good for Joseph, he is faced with a dilemma that he never, ever thought he'd be faced with. And he's forced to make a decision, like many of us. But in his case, either way he goes, he loses. It's the kind of decision you never, ever want to make. But here's what I want you to hear today. This is so cool. In the midst of making this decision, Joseph gives us an insight that helps us understand the importance of asking this question. What is the story that you want to tell? Genesis chapter 39, I'm going to begin with verse 6. I'm just going to read 2 or 3 verses, and then we'll explain all this as we go. Genesis 39, 6. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. So Joseph's pretty much running the show for this very influential Egyptian. Middle of verse right before verse 7. Now, Joseph was well-built and handsome, which is kind of like foreshadowing, something's coming, right? and this is what's so cool. This is ancient literature, okay? You don't read literature this old. This is as ancient as anything you've ever read. And here's all this cool literary stuff. And after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, come to bed with me. Verse 8, but he refused. Now, just to put this in proper context, we don't know what she looked like. I mean, I had to say that, right? Because we're thinking, movie, and there she is. Oh my gosh, and how does he overcome this temptation? Maybe she was beautiful. Maybe she wasn't. We don't know how old she was. We don't know anything, okay? All we know is he's about 18 or maybe 19 years old, okay? So he's in his prime, and here's the boss's wife saying, come to bed with me, okay? Just to put that in context. Now, at this point, here's what's so cool. At this point, Joseph applies this question. Because we don't know how many, we know that she begged him over and over and over. This was not a one-time thing. She kept coming to him over and over and said, sleep with me, sleep with me, sleep with me. And here he is in a situation that goes like this, okay, if I do, eventually I'll be found out or she'll tire of me and discard me. If I don't, then I'm going to put her to shame. She's going to be embarrassed and she has control over my fate and I'm doomed. I'm doomed either way. I mean, the only option I have is to try to run away. I'm in Egypt. What are the odds of that? I'm a Hebrew. I can't fit in and slip out. So he's doomed. So at some point after she begs him and begs him and begs him and tries to taunt him and seduce him, he finally has a conversation. And in the conversation, and I love this, he rehearses out loud, and I think this is so important for us. He rehearses out loud his story. Ma'am, my story is I was kidnapped, I was thrown in a well, I was, rescued sort of by your husband. I started cleaning out the barns, and I was cleaning out bigger barns. Next thing I know, I'm in charge of the guys cleaning out the barns. Then I'm in charge of the guys that are in charge of the guys. All these years I've worked for your husband, and your husband has entrusted his household to me. Your husband has entrusted everything to me. The only thing he doesn't concern himself with is what he eats. And so he rehearses out loud his story because the issue for Joseph, as the issue is for all of us, as we rehearse our story, which of the options facing us is most consistent with our story? What story do we want to tell? Skip down to verse 8. Here's what he says to her. This is the end of him telling his story. With me in charge, he told her, my master, and she knew all this, but he's rehearsing his story. It's such a powerful thing. With me in charge, he told her, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. Verse 9, no one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you. And this is kind of funny. Because you are his wife. You have a story too, ma'am, okay? The decision you're about to make is going to become a permanent part of your story. Apparently she didn't care, and my guess is Joseph is not the first, and I'll tell you why I think that in just a minute. I don't think this was out of the blue, she's this committed woman, but anyway. So now, listen, this is so cool. He rehearses his story, and you're his wife. How then? Now listen to this question. This is so relevant for all of us, especially those of us who are Christ followers and those of us that believe God is involved in the daily affairs of our life. Listen to this. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? In other words, why, in light of my story so far, would I want to add this chapter to my story? In light of God's providential care of me, in light of the fact, not that good things have happened to me, in light of the fact that terrible things have happened to me, and God has been faithful to me and rescued me, and your husband has entrusted everything to me, in light of God's providence, in light of your husband's trust, which of these options is most consistent with the story so far, and which one is most consistent with the story I want to tell? And so he says to her, I can't sleep with you. It's inconsistent with my story so far. It's not the story that I want to tell. Verse 10, and though she spoke to Joseph day after day, and I don't think she just spoke to him, do you? And though she spoke to him in the part that's left out of the Bible day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even to be with her. Because if he had one of two stories he was going to tell. God rescued me through a difficult time. Potiphar entrusted everything he had to me. He trusted me with everything. He didn't even keep his eyes on me, so I had an affair with his wife. There's a good story. Let me get this straight. Potiphar trusted you, so you slept with his wife? Is that the story you want to tell? I don't think so. Is that consistent? No. Or Potiphar entrusted everything to me. I was a faithful steward and I obeyed God, and I did everything I could for Potiphar. And when his wife tempted me and made herself available to me, I decided the consistent thing to do with my story, the story I wanted to tell, is I refused her advances, even though I knew at the end that would probably cost me as well. Which story did he want to tell? Which story do you want to tell? Every decision you make becomes part of your story. And as big and as bold and as complicated as it is right now, in a few years, it's nothing more than 2 or 3 sentences in the story that you will tell. Well, little did he know he was going to get to tell his story 2 or 3 more times, because Potiphar's wife framed him, claimed that he tried to rape her, called out for help. Potiphar and the guys came running. She said, this Hebrew that you brought into our home tried to take advantage of me. Potiphar, instead of putting him to death, which makes me think this isn't the first time they've been through this, Potiphar, who should have put him to death and had the power to do so, throws him in the dungeon. While he's in the king and Pharaoh's dungeon, he runs into a couple of guys that used to work for Pharaoh. Maybe you know this story. And he tells them his story. It's so cool, you can read it for yourself. He says, I was taken as a slave. I was kidnapped by my brothers. I was sold as a slave. I worked for Potiphar. I did nothing wrong. Guys, I can tell you my whole story. I don't have to skip anything. I don't have to lie about anything. I can tell you my whole story. I shouldn't be in this dungeon. And if either of you is able to help get me out, I would appreciate it. 2 years go by. And one of the fellows he was in prison with is with Pharaoh, and Pharaoh has a dream, and nobody can interpret the dream. And the guy's like, oh yeah, I knew this guy in prison, and he interpreted dreams. Pharaoh says, go get Joseph, and they shave him and clean him up and bring him to Pharaoh. And once again, Joseph can tell his whole story. I was kidnapped from my family, from my country. I was brought here. I served Potiphar. I was set up. I was accused, but I'm innocent, and I'll do what I can to help you, Pharaoh. And Pharaoh sees in Joseph an unusual young man, and by the end of the story, Joseph is made the prime minister of the nation of Egypt, and God uses him to deliver Egypt through the famine and deliver his family from the famine as well. Because even though it was a no-win situation, he made a decision that was consistent with the story he could tell, had told, and wanted to tell in the future. And the same situation, the same dynamic will be a reality in every one of our lives. Now, the other interesting thing about this story, because it's so multifaceted, is that Joseph's brothers, they also had a story to tell. Here's how their story went. We had a younger brother. We hated him. We were so jealous of him, and finally, our jealousy got the best of us. And because there was kind of this group dynamic one afternoon by the campfire, we decided we wouldn't kill him, we would just sell him. So we sold him to some slave traders, and we never thought we'd see him again. But then we had to manufacture a story for our father, and we lied to our father. And in the moment of lying to him, there was all this, we felt like we're doing it. We've pulled it off. We'll never be caught. And there was all this adrenaline. We lied to our father, and we broke our father's heart. And then we had to live with that lie every single year for 15 years. And there was an empty seat at the table. And every year it was Joseph's birthday. Our father was brokenhearted, and we had to live with that. And we had to lie. We lived a lie because of a decision we made. And you know what? When I shared this principle with my family, here's how I explained it to my kids, because this is such a big deal. I said to my kids, kids, don't ever opt for anything that makes you a liar for life. Because there are decisions you can make. In fact, you may be on the verge of one right now, and the profit looks good, and the pleasure looks good, but to opt for that will make you a liar for life. You'll have something in your past that you will always lie about or be tempted to lie about. Don't do anything. I don't care how it looks at this point. Don't do anything that you'll look back and realize that decision made me a liar for life. His brothers lied about it for 50. It wasn't just a moment in time. They lived with that lie for 15 years. Hey, what's your story? I was so jealous of my brother, I sold him, broke my father's heart, and then lied about it for 15 years. Now, there's a story to tell. But the story even goes further, because you know how this ends. Eventually, the brothers end up in Egypt buying grain from the Egyptians, and who's in charge of selling the grain? Joseph. And he recognizes his brothers. And now he has another decision to make, a decision he never thought he would have to make, a decision that took him totally by surprise. What do I do with my conniving, lying, father heart-breaking brothers now that I'm in power and I can do anything I want to them? What do I do? And once again, the option is use my power to exact revenge and maybe further break my father's heart, or use my power to do to them exactly what they don't deserve. Just like God did for me when I was in the bottom of that well. Just like God did for me when I was in that dungeon. Just like God did for me when I found favor with Pharaoh. Which of these options is most consistent with my story thus far, and which is the story that I want to tell? Story number one, I was large and in charge. My brothers were on their knees before me. I was the prime minister of Egypt, and I had my revenge. That's a story to tell. I was large and in charge. I was the Pharaoh's number 2 guy. I was the prime minister of Egypt. I could have treated my brothers any way I wanted, and I treated them exactly the way that God had treated me instead of the way they treated me. That's a story to tell. But either way, his decision would be a permanent part of his story. See how it works? So let me ask you, what's your story so far? What's the story that you want to tell? Now let me tell you, this is such a big deal. This is bigger than an event. This is bigger than a moment in time. For some of you, for some of us, there will be seasons in our life that we're going to have to ask this question over and over and over every single day because we're writing a chapter of our lives. I have a friend that in 2007 lost his job. He got kicked out of a company. I heard his side. I didn't hear the other side, but according to him, he was mistreated. And the way the story unfolded, the way I understood it, he was mistreated. He wouldn't be able to go back into the industry he was in. He was out for good. His career was over. His name was tarnished. He was probably going to have to leave town. We're having breakfast one morning. I'd known him for years, great guy. Been on some of our boards here. He said, Andy, I don't even know how to think about this. He said, I have no idea what to do. I'm just kind of lost. And I said to him, you know what? I can't tell you what to do, but here's what I know for sure. Eventually, you'll find a job. Eventually, you're going to be able to provide for your family. And here's what I know. Eventually, this terrible, terrible surprise season of your life will be nothing more than a story that you tell. The story of how you got kicked out of the company, lost your job, and lost everything. It's just going to be a story you tell. Write it and live it well. Because one day, your sons are going to be old enough to understand what happened through an adult grid. What's the story you want to tell? That's how you decide how to respond.
That's a little bit different take on the way I've always read that. And when you're thinking about your life story that you're having to write, every day is a new page in your storybook. And it's great that we can tell our story. Mine is messed up from the beginning, and it ain't that pretty. A lot of stuff ashamed of, a lot of stuff I've learned from, and I grew out of it. It made me stronger. It made me a better person. Everybody talk about, well, if you could go back and change it, would you? No. Nope. Because that would alter the story, and it's going to alter your ending. Had I wish I not done some of the stuff? Yeah, I do. Had I wish I didn't hurt some of the people I did? Yeah, I do. Can I change it? Nope. Can I learn from it and know what not to do in the future? Yep. Same as all of us. We all make mistakes because we're human. And we try to limit them and not make the same one over. We limit it so we don't hurt anybody by them. But anybody who tells you their story is perfectly clean and never made a mistake, I'm going to have to question it. Because I don't know any human being that's never had an error in judgment. I know some that their errors are not as bad as the others. Still things you're not proud of. But every day you add something to your story, and just like Joseph there, man, he had all rights to just, could you imagine the story that he really could have written? What he had the power and by human means the right to do so. How to exact revenge on his conniving brothers. He had to live with that, being a slave, but he made the best of it because he kept honoring God. And there's a lot of things that happen to us that we have no control over. And it hurts, but you don't have any control. You don't have any control over traffic accidents, loss of loved ones, things that ruin family relationships. It's life. And it's how you handle it that really counts. And what you're going to write down in your book. And that's something I've never really done. And I know people who do. They write journals every day and got volumes of them. I don't. I never have. But is it good? Is it bad? Right? Wrong? No. If you like doing it, do it. Because you writing your story and somebody else will read it later on. I just wonder what they're going to write about me. Well, I appreciate that. Appreciate the vote of confidence, but they're going to interpret it a different way. But it don't matter. What I got to do is be the best I can be. If I can stay in God's grace and be the best person I can be, I'm still going to be a screw up. I'm still going to stumble. I'm still going to fall. But I'm going to get up. I ain't going to stay there. And I ain't blaming it on anybody else. Whatever I do, I'm responsible for. And you know what? I'm responsible for how I respond to something else that somebody done to me. Look at Joseph. I mean, he could have had all rights to throw a fit when they got him out of the well and sold him. What good would it have done him? Could you think of the story that he was writing there to get him out of the well and sell him to slave traders? What would happen if he started throwing the fit and rebelling right there in the old time of slave trading? Probably killed him. Now, he was still in the grace of God. We know where he would have went, but it wasn't his time. Do you think he served a lot of people by writing his story to be pleasing to God and not to man? But look what he got into. And look what it saved. Why are the decisions we make so important in shaping the kind of stories our lives portray? Every day you're making decisions. But why are they so important? Because they have consequences. Your decisions in financing, your decisions in work, retirement, I love it. It's all your decisions, but everything you do will add another chapter or another page into your story. So all the decisions you do during the day, during the week, during the month, during the year, when you're planning something, it's going to be important in shaping the kind of stories our lives portray. Can y'all think of something that you do that is a decision that you make that is shaping the story of your life that it's going to portray? Mine right here is a big one. That's just being here. That has changed the entire direction of the storybook of my life, if anybody would want to write one. Because we had dinner with some friends the other night and mentioned about the good news of what I accepted and took the challenge to do. And you? So, yeah, every day, the decisions we make. Yes, sir? That is a decision. You make a decision to be here. You make a decision to be part of the church. Yes, ma'am? That's when the Spirit calls and you make the decision to commit your life to Christ. That is a big decision in your life. It's the best. And as you do that, there's pages upon pages of things that you can write. If Joe kept a diary or a journal of all the folks that she's talked to or led, I think we could fill a library. You know, but you don't know what that decision to go up and talk to that person, where it led them. She is a great person, and I admire that. But you don't know the decision that you made there, The story of Billy Graham and his beginnings. He didn't just go to a revival meeting. A friend of his invited him to go. He didn't know anything about it. But that one friend didn't accept and didn't go. I don't know the whole story behind that. But that's what led Billy to start. As a small child, kid, going to a revival meeting. A decision to go. Like you said, a decision to commit and a decision to follow through. How many lives do you think he's touched around the world in 80 days? just massive amounts. But when you make a decision to follow Christ, you make a decision to join and be a member of a church organization, a church body. It takes commitment, and you be there. And I'm thankful for all of y'all. I'm thankful for our congregation. I'm thankful for everybody that's tuning in on the tube and watching us. We don't know what the commitment they're going to have or where this decision will lead others. In your own life story up to this point, how would you compare the relative significance of A, the decisions and choices you made, and B, the circumstances and reality of your environment which you had no say in? Which set of factors had the most influence on you? Up to this point, the relative significance of the decisions and choices you made. Some of them were good, some of them were bad. Some of my bad decisions, trying to work through them, led me to better decisions. I took something that it took a section of our life that I wasn't proud of, and it created us some difficulties, and we was trying to work through it, but it led me to needing a part-time job. And that led to serving, led to being a servant, led to being a leader, led to where we are now. So a bad decision on my part has really turned out to be a better decision for the outcome. And that's the way the set of factors will influence you. Sometimes you've got to make something good out of something bad. And in the meantime, you don't know what's happening. Joseph didn't know something good was going to come out of him being sold as a slave. You think a lot of good come out of that? And then he gets accused of something he's totally innocent of again and thrown in prison. He had no control over that. Did something better come out of it? So he went from good, bottomed out, threw it in a ditch and sold. So that's pretty bad. Something good, threw it out and put in jail. Something bad to something good. And it wasn't, the only decision he made was to honor God. That's all he meant. That was his decision. He was writing his story, and he wanted to be proud of it. Anybody got one? You ever make a decision in the circumstance of your environment? Yeah, your environment and decisions will intertwine with each other, and one's going to drive the other one. So, and you accepting a job down here. Talk about changing your whole environment. Yeah. So, but we're glad you did. Hmm. I'm, I'm, I'm thankful for each and every one of you. I'm thankful for all those that's tuning in, and I'm grateful. I'm humbled by it. And yes, sir.
See, like with me, when I was younger, I thought I had to be like, always same trouble in the schoolhouse.
You had to do what now?
Same trouble in the
Oh,
schoolhouse.
yeah.
And then when I got to getting older, I figured all that bad talk and all that really wasn't worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
And Mom was saying, I ain't gonna pay a mind you if you're gonna talk like that.
Uh-uh.
And she pushed me aside, and I started feeling better, and she seen I was trying to do better.
That's a decision you made.
My mom and I get closer.
It will. Adversities will bring you tighter sometimes. You got two choices. It'll either kick the relationship apart or to make it stronger. So, but that's by decisions that you make.
At one time, I had long hair, looked rough.
Mm-hmm.
My mom said it's normal to have that.
I had the long hair and the full beard and everything else. My hair was over my shoulders, and I was just your typical hippie dude. So,
I had changed for the better.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I started following God, and that decision, um, the hair is still there, getting thin in the back, but it's still there. In your observation, what are some typical poor or unwise decisions that people seem most reluctant to talk about? Affairs, addictions, financial problems where they either borrowed wrong, stole wrong, cooked the books to get something. Those are hard to talk about because it points the finger right back at yourself and your failures. And a lot of people will lie about it. They'll try to change the meaning a little bit so it don't really mean the same thing. Well, it wasn't an affair. We just both needed time together. You're married. She's married. And it wasn't an affair. Well, it really wasn't adultery. It was kind of cheating, but it didn't hurt nobody. Really. Why does it ache at your heart? Why does it hurt you so bad on the inside now? When you have to look at your spouse and lie to them about it, or tell them and they no longer have the same trust in you. So it really didn't do anything. I really didn't steal that money. We just had to adjust the book so it would balance. Okay, which is it? If you have to adjust the books, it wasn't yours, so why do it? What's wrong with the books that they wouldn't balance to start with? But it wasn't stealing. See how the decisions can go that people would be embarrassed to talk about? I'm embarrassed about our finances many years ago, but what we went through has helped several other couples that we've talked to, and really enlightened them a lot to make sure they don't have to face what we did. It made us stronger, kept us together, but it was decisions we made that led to that. But we're going to turn around and make something better out of it. Anybody got something y'all think would be unwise decisions made that most people are reluctant to talk about? Drinking. Well, yes, drinking, the addiction, smoking. You know, only non-smokers know that smokers stink. Hey, and I was a smoker, but only non-smokers realize that smokers stink. But the addictions, and like you said, the alcohol, I can stop it anytime I want to. I just don't want to. So you enjoy feeling like that when you get up in the morning. And you know, statistically speaking, y'all know the difference between a statistics and a lie is just the way you interpret it. And they say that 3 out of 10 people suffer with diarrhea. Does that mean the other 7 enjoy it?
All I was gonna say is that the medication I'm taking now, I can't drink no more.
Well,
I get sick.
yep, it will. And
I don't need it.
no, you don't. And I'm not kicking anybody for taking a drink. And I have been to the point that that was my daily life. I don't need it. I used to go after quantity. Now I go after quality. Having a good mixed drink, there's nothing wrong with that. Doing it at home, you're not driving, the flavor of a nice mixed drink, there's nothing wrong with that. But now when you have to keep going and going and going till it's no longer you in control, now you got a problem. Let's don't go there. And I will not do one in front of somebody that does have a problem. I'm not going to allow them, for my pleasure, to stumble and fall. Because if that brother, I know that he cannot handle it, I'm not going to offer one. And we're going to have a Coca-Cola, or we're going to have a glass of water, or iced tea, or something. And that's the decision you make. And like Mike said, it's those decisions that people are most scared and afraid and ashamed to talk about. Addictions, being narcotics, alcohol, gambling, porn, whatever. It's embarrassing. But is that what you want in your life story? You're going to decide that. Do it. Donuts? Well, now, you know, I've often wondered why they don't do it in a box of 10. That way you have one for each finger. You know, but I guess they do it in 12, so it's an even dozen, and you can leave 2 in case you drop 1 or 2. Is that what it is, Brenda? That way. But now if you get 20, can you put them on your toes and fingers? You have to go to the chiropractor after you eat. Yep. How easy is it for you to identify with the story of Joseph in the Old Testament? To what degree do you think we should be able to relate to this story? Anybody relate to Joseph in there? How the circumstances around them has dictated their life instead of you dictating your circumstances that you're in? You know, can you identify with Joseph and all the stuff that he went through? The hatred, the betrayal, the lies. Sound like something off of Jerry Springer. You're going to go through it every day. It does. It defines our character, and how you handle it is different. Joseph was entirely different from his brothers. I don't know why. God showed him favor. Maybe that's what they seen and was jealous of. And not, instead of being jealous of that, why not be thankful and join in with it? You know, you take folks that win the lottery, they end up with a lot of people that hate them because they got all that. Yeah. I pray for it, and I actually pray for us to win it. But when we don't, I also pray for the ones who received it to have God's blessing and power show through, and to have his grace, mercy, and understanding of what they have, and to do good with it. If I can't do it, hopefully they can. They've been great, and they still say that billion, whatever it was, 1,600,000,000 has not been claimed yet. There was one winning ticket bought for it. They know the store, the time, and everything. And nobody's claimed it. Over a billion, what was it, 1,600,000,000? Is that what it was? Or six? All right, 1,600,000,000. Duh. And nobody wants it. One person got it. There was one single ticket. They know the store, they know the time. Nobody's claimed it. Could you do good with that? Yeah. But my prayer goes out. We didn't win it. I thank the Lord anyway. And I pray for those individuals that do. And that's if you read up on a lot of them stories, you'll find how most of it has ruined their lives because they wasn't ready to receive that kind of blessing and don't know what to do with it. My first one is I turned to Him and asked to put people in my life, in our path, that we can trust, you can trust, and we can do something good with this. But I can identify with Joseph in a lot of ways, with people that's tried to hurt you in the past, people that's lied about you, people that stolen from you, family that hurt you. You can identify with him. Anybody got one that y'all identify with him? Come on now, throw something out here. This is a group session. Yes, sir? Yeah. Be happy all the way around. Yep. But for Joseph in his story, any of y'all relate in anything that happened to him? I think each and every one of us got a part in our life that's had something that we can relate to how he feels. Something bad happened to you, and then something good, and you got the power to. Grandpa used to tell us that when you got a man down, kick him and give him a chance to rise above it. No, you got a man down, help him up, and that takes a special page in your book to do that. What are the most important elements that you want to include in your future story? It ain't just I came, I saw, I conquered, I left. We can do that in one little paragraph. You go down and you look at the cemetery, and on the headstones, they got their name. They usually have a little saying, beloved wife, beloved husband, glad he's gone, not real sure. There's something there. And then they got the birth date. And they got the date of death. And right in the middle is that little tiny dash. And that little tiny dash is your life condensed down. That one little dash. So, what's the most important elements that you want to include in your future story? I want to be known for who I really was, for who I really am. I don't want to write my story because I ain't that important. I want the lives of the people I touch, the people we touch, to write my story. Whether it's good or bad, I want it honest. I want it truthful. The truth hurts sometimes. A lot of skeletons in the closet, and the bones will rattle out on the floor. You remember the last one we did was a breathing room where all the stuff was piled up in the closet, and you opened the door. All my stuff will fall out like that because it was packed full. It's going to fall out. All of us got something like that. So the most important elements that I want to include in my future story is honesty. If we can include that, let it be. I'm not perfect by no means. I don't claim to be. That's why I ask y'all, if y'all see me doing something that ain't right, or if I'm telling you something that you don't feel is right, please bring it to my attention so we can learn together. Because I'm just like y'all. I'm a living, sinning, in the flesh human being. I do have, it got y'all thinking. And that's all I want to do. If I can get you thinking about God's Word and how it relates into your life, how it relates into all y'all's life, and look it up. Don't take my word for it. Look it up. And be thankful for it. Because if I can get you thinking, I've done my job. I don't want to present this as all facts. I want to present it as information for you to look up and look to. So I wanted honesty. Anybody got one? What you want your future story to be included? Trustworthiness? You don't. Look what Joseph had. You think that was a whole line of trust that Potiphar had for him? Mm-hmm. Yes, sir?
Trust by God.
Trust by God. Yes. That's if he can trust you, and he knows you best, because he knows what you're doing when the lights are out. He knows what you're doing when you're by yourself. He knows what you're thinking before you think it. Mm-hmm. Can you sin just by thinking? Yep. Anybody works on a computer, I guarantee you sin at least 5 to 10 times a day. If you work with a computer, if you work with people, you work with anything mechanical, if you work outside of a bubble with yourself, you're going to think it. If you are alive, you got it. If you are alive. How do you think your future story will be impacted by the things that have already happened in your past? It has everything to do with it. That's right. As I've said before, who I was is not who I am. But who I am is because of who I was. So it's my past. And I think my future story is impacted greatly by the things that's already happened in the past. Because I've learned from it. I know what not to do. I know what to do. I tell them at work, I ain't that smart. I just know a whole bunch that don't work. And I can remember the things that don't work. I know what not to do again. My dad, he always had a sense of humor, and we fixed about anything we had, TVs, radios, whatever. And I remember, I think I was about 9 years old. We was living over there in Henley Homes, and we'd found old TV on the side of the road because we didn't have one. And some of y'all chronologically gifted people remember the drugstores where they had tube testers in there. The RCA had the dog sitting on the little metal cabinet, and it was the old vacuum tubes. And you could take them out and go down there and plug them into the sockets and test them, and it'd tell you which one to use or the closest. And we had one, and it was old Admiral set. I remember it was a brownish gold color. It was about that big, about that, pretty good size one. And he's trying to get it to work, and I'm kind of curious and watching him, and he tells me, reach in there and grab that red wire and pull it off. And when I did, it threw me across the room. It went, and I got up He said, now, that was a lesson I wanted you to learn. That's called flyback voltage. It's named that for two reasons. One, if you touch it, you're going to fly back out of there. And the other one is actually when the cathode or the picture tube is degaussing, that is the voltage that is bled off from around the glass back to the capacitor. And it picks up somewhere around 100,000 volts. And it will slap the taste out your mouth. Trust me, I know that. So I know what not to touch. He had a good sense of humor, though. And as we talk about it here, and I talk about it, as bad as we had it, I'm really thankful because what I learned, I owe it to him too. You know, even though the relationship wasn't the greatest by no means, I picked up and learned from that. So, you know, I have to give him credit too. From the past. And that's my future story, is my past. What I learned, what I have done, and what I have shared with others. That is my past. And it's changed. It will impact my future story because it made me who I am. The same as all of y'all. Every one of us has went through some different circumstances. Some good, some bad. Family losses, family squabbles that will just tear us apart, that we can't do nothing about. Deaths, weddings, births, funerals, doctors, lawyers. It's life. But you have to make the decision just like Joseph. Are you going to let what's going on around you dictate your future? You know, that old example of the boiling water. If you take an egg and you put it in boiling water and just leave it there, what happens to the egg? It gets hard boiled, and you leave it long enough, it's ruined. It's nothing. And they will explode. You take a string bean and put in that boiling water. What happens? It boils till it comes apart. But you can take a teaspoon of coffee and put in that boiling water, and what happens? It changes the environment that it went into. The boiling water is still the same, and it destroyed the egg. The boiling water is still the same, and it destroyed that string bean. The boiling water is still the same when coffee was put into it, and it changed the environment that it went into. That's our story. We can change the environment for the future. None of us are perfect by no means. And we all going to learn from our past. We can learn from each other's past. Y'all sit down with Linda and I, and we'll tell you the stuff that we went through, and y'all know not to do it. And if you do it, you'll know the results, because if you take and put baking soda and vinegar and you mix them, what happens? It just boils over. We can do the same thing with each other. You won't have to clean up the mess. We can tell you what it's going to be. We can tell you the outcome. All because of our past. And that's what's going to be our future story. Every day you write in a new page. Write it in a manner with God first. And you will find life is a whole lot better. Your story is going to change, but not the ending. Let's have fun with it. Enjoy it and help others. Any questions? This one presents something to you hadn't thought about before in a different way. I never thought of Joseph in that context. Yes, sir?
God shows amazing secrets.
He does. He'll share the amazing secrets with you. And it's not a real big secret. The secret is understanding. That's the secret. Being willing and step up and do something. That's simple. It's our life. Next week will be session 3, and I did not write down the name of it. So everybody's going to tune in and be surprised. Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you now for this day. We thank you for this time together and for the fellowship and just being able to share with each other, to lift each other up and learn. Father, we just thank you that you are here with us, and we ask that as every day a page of our story is being written, that we glorify you with it. Strengthen us that we may serve you. Show us favor. Lift us up and encourage us and guide us as we go through, and may we touch many, many souls for your kingdom. We give you praise, glory, and honor for this day. In Jesus' name.